So, hello, Mr. Conron. How are you doing today?
Fine, thank you.
Okay, so I have a few questions for you.
If I
Thank you
stay
for.
awake long enough.
Yes. So, how does storytelling contribute to the evolution of human consciousness?
There can never be any progress in the human consciousness without the story. For the story reflects all of us. For all of us have a story, and all of us are on the journey, and that story continually changes, modifies itself, but it still becomes part of our life story.
What is the art of pantomime?
The art of pantomime is, if it's French pantomime, it's making the invisible visible. However, there's many forms of pantomime. There's commedia dell'arte pantomime, originating in Italy in the 1600s, and there was reflected part of the society that they found themselves in. It became boisterous, loud, rude. Out of it came Punch and Judy, which is a terrible show for kids to look at as they slap each other around and hurt one another, and yet people found that quite funny back during the beginning stages of commedia dell'arte.
What was your first paying gig as a performer?
Wow, that's so long ago. It is difficult for me to remember. Paying gig, well, I worked the metro or subway system in Paris with another partner dressed as in a costume of the French mime, and thus performed. One of us performed, the other held the hat for the audience, that if they liked the performance they would put some sous into the hat. But the person that was holding the hat also had another purpose, and that was to watch for the gendarmes who didn't want at that particular time subway performances, and thus he carried a whistle with him, and when he blew his whistle, both of us would grab up the hat and run like heck up the staircase across the parks with the gendarmes behind us.
So, what time period would that have been? What
That'd
years?
be in the 70s.
In the 70s, okay. And who was your earliest artistic influence?
Would have to be an older lady by the name of Robin Deering, who in London was the wife of the artistic director, and his first name escapes me, but it was Mr. Deering, and she did a lot of workshops in the art form. And I remember sitting when I was in my early 20s at one of her workshops, and she came out on stage and lifted this very heavy object and took it over to an invisible table, placed this invisible object on the invisible table, took an invisible knife out of an invisible drawer and cut that object. It turned out to be a watermelon, and she ate the watermelon right in front of the audience and spit out the seeds, and then cleaned the knife and put it back in the drawer, closed the drawer, and walked off stage. And I was fascinated. I was hypnotized. And it was at that moment, from Robin Deering, that I decided to look into the art of mime, which so intrigued me with its concept of making the invisible visible. And that's where it all started with me.
Okay. What are some of your thoughts on the medium of television?
Well, television, as any media, can be used for good and for informative information, or it can be used for the very opposite. It can be used to amplificate one's own self-satisfaction and one's own sense of product purchase. So TV is an important media, of which it can be very communicative or very destructive.
Who was Marcel Marceau?
Well, Marcel Marceau, in his early stages, was a French artist, a painter, who took his lessons from a very rough sergeant of the Foreign Legion by the name of Etienne de Croo. And he became a student of Etienne de Croo and became so entranced with the art of mime. Etienne de Croo really invented the illusions of mime. And Marcel Marceau took the walls and the ropes and the climbing of ladders and took all those illusions that Etienne de Croo, for some way, invented them or found a way to make that visible, to make those things visible. Marcel took those ideas and really added musical flow and characters to those illusions, thus developing the French style of mime that we in the North American culture became accustomed to.
Okay. How did you come to work with Red Skelton?
It was an accident, as most things are, and it all happened from Paul Gallant, which was a Toronto-based mime and stage clown, of which I wasn't familiar with the concept, and he actually had Red Skelton in his studio in Toronto during one of Red Skelton's performances at the name escapes me. Was it Thompson Hall in Toronto? And I was one of Paul Gallant's students, studying with him for 3 weeks in the summer, and got an opportunity to meet this fine man. And I asked him whether there were any opportunities to study under him, whether he was giving any workshops at all. And he said he did, and he sent me some information on it, and I signed up and went south, and there I spent some time in Hartford, Connecticut, and got to know Red. And he didn't hire anyone else to do his workshops. This busy man actually, on a personal level, gave up his time and gifts to young students who were craving to learn from a master.
So how did Original Kids Theatre Company come to exist?
An accident. In my school career, while teaching, I began to see the arts, with my background in mime and stage clown, as a valuable resource to help students better improve their own self-concept of themselves by giving them a sense of accomplishment through working in the arts. I took that concept of being able to improve students' lives through the arts when a friend of mine was appointed executive director of Alma College, was a private school, girls' school in St. Thomas, which was empty. And he came to me and said, "Dave, I have this big facility down in St. Thomas with nothing going on. I wondered if you could come down and take a look and whether you could create a program that might fit into this big school to give us some exposure in the community to start to bring people back to Alma College." So I came down, I took a look at it, and then I thought, well, maybe I can use some of my experience I'm gaining from teaching, using the arts to move children, theater in particular. And so I went to Stratford on a Sunday or a Saturday, and I went to an artist friend I knew down there and asked him to draw me a couple of little stick figures that were cartoon-like, and he did, and I took those and I went to a park bench in Dorchester and sat with another friend and looked at these stick figures, and she said, well, they're very kid-like, and I said, yeah, but they're really original. And there was the name, Original Kids. And so I created a theater program for young people by the name of Original Kids. Beginning in 1991, we had 14 members in 1991. By 1994, we moved from Alma College and came to London because the London students were outnumbering the St. Thomas kids 3-1. We had an enrollment of 100 students by 1994. So I knew I was on to something. I didn't know what it was, but I thought I was doing something that was important. And therefore I brought them to London, and we formed a little company and a theater in the London the London Museum on Rideout Street there, and there we stayed till about 98, at which time I got to meet a lot of influential Londoners, met Andy Spreet, and asked if he would build a theater for us at the Covent Garden Market, and he was interested in that. I said we would put his name up on lights and treat him quite special, and he did, and that's where Original Kids remains today, at the London Covent Garden Market. Wow. That was a long one. Yes. Sorry.
That's okay. What relationship can you see between faith and the creative process?
Well, first of all, you have to have faith in your own creative process, that if it doesn't work, you will learn what doesn't work and then apply that to your next lesson in the creative process. You can't have a creative process if you do not have faith in what you're doing.
Is it important to cultivate local artistic talent, or can a community's need for creative expression be entirely satisfied with imported digital media?
That is a very, very powerful question. If you want to, I believe, to generate progress in the spiritual development of a community and the human beings that live within that community, for that's what a community is, it doesn't exist without the human element, then I think that you have to somehow help develop and utilize the power of the creative person that lives in that community over everything else.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Conron, for spending this time.
You're welcome.
I look forward to many conversations in the future.
Okay, thanks.
Take care.